So, welcome back. Now, if you survived the other two tutorials, you know about externalities and allocative, productive and Pareto efficiency, and how to show them in a PPF diagram. So, we sort of talked about negative externalities before when the social costs exceed the private costs. So what is the problem? I mean, it's very good saying that. So what? Who cares if the social costs or social costs exceed the private costs or the social benefits exceed the private benefits? I mean, that's very good saying that, but what implications does it have on us as consumers? So a negative externality could be passive smoking, for example, because people don't realise how bad it actually is, because they don't take into account the full external cost and the full private cost even. They do realise it's bad for them, but they don't realise how bad it is for them. So they don't realise like what effect it would have on their working, for example, which could affect a future employer. So so that's the problem caused by negative externalities. So they have excess production, as we demand too much of them. We shouldn't be consuming as much of them as we currently do in the market. So that's the problem caused by it. We don't realise how bad they are. Okay, so we're going to draw a diagram. This may look a bit excessive for now, but hopefully we'll get to grips with it soon. Oh wait. Should I draw a big one? No, I'll just draw it like this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to explain bits around it and rub it off, and we'll try and muddle our way through it. Okay, so sorry, let me close the door. Oh, God's sake, no one ever closes my door. Never mind. So that is so what we're going to put on the axes then is pricing. Yeah. So it's the same as demand and supply diagram, just checking. Price, quantity demanded and supplied. So quantity demanded and supplied. Obviously I'm going to put a demand and supply diagram sort of thing. Plus supplied. So they're your axes then. So what are we going to be drawing on this? Well, if we know, I don't know if I said this. So in a negative externalities, we're assuming there's no positive externalities. It may seem simple, but that means the social benefit, social marginal benefit, is the same as a social, is the same as a private marginal benefit. You may go, what's a marginal? What's that mean? Well, it's the benefit producing one more unit of or good or service. So that is the same as the cost. You switch it around. Sorry. So, if we know that, so hopefully that'll have explained, you've got from that we have a downward sloping curve there. And this is the private marginal benefit, because if we produce less of the good, oh wait, that's not the price. Cost benefit, sorry. Oh, Jesus. Cost less benefits. So cost less benefits and your PMB. Obviously you explain this private marginal benefit you put out. I'm just going to quickly label it. PMB equals SMB. So why does it slope downwards? Well, if we produce more of something, the benefit is going to be less. That's why it slopes downwards. So what we need here is we need a, because the social marginal cost curve is going to equal the private marginal cost curve, isn't it? Oh wait, yeah. Sorry, yeah. So if our social marginal cost curve is higher than our private marginal cost curve, that means it's going to be a higher gradient. So your SMC and your PMC. Now, as you can see from this, sorry, I'll actually rub this axis off. We've got a high price. So you've got P1, and is it Q? Yeah, sorry, it's Q1, Q. So you can see, I'll label it to equilibriums actually. Have I done that right? Sorry. Just make sure I've actually drawn that right. So what we've got here is when the private marginal cost curve intersects the private marginal benefit curve. We've got this is where the free market equilibrium, because the free market equilibrium occurs where we're assuming that they don't. So it's where if the market was left to the forces of demand and supply, that's where our equilibrium would be, because we wouldn't assume the full social costs, so we'd only be considering the private costs and the private benefits. So that's why this is the free market equilibrium. So that's your free market equilibrium. And then up here, have I labelled it A and B? Sorry. Yeah. So we'll label that point C, we'll label that point A. Now what we've got here, in this area here, we've got something called a welfare loss triangle. Now the welfare loss triangle shows the welfare loss to society of the difference. Yeah, hopefully you can sort of see that. So we'll label this point B. And now you always need to, when you explain all these diagrams, you need to say ABC equals welfare loss Now, if this is the current marginal cost, the PMC, what we're assuming here, and this is the full social cost, the true cost to society, we could say the difference between these two is the external cost. So, because social marginal cost is private marginal cost plus external marginal cost, the difference between them two would be the external cost. So that's why we need a point, and at one point on the same curve, showing the external cost, and we've got C there and B. So B to C or C to B equals the external cost. So that is the external cost of an activity. So how can we? That's a basic diagram there. So how can we fix that? I mean, that's really good saying you. That's what happens, but how can we fix that? One of the ways we can fix that is by taxation or regulation. Sorry, let me just make sure there's no other way, and I'm not going over that again. So you could, yeah. Sorry, just give me a minute, and just make sure I'm not missing anything out. Yeah, so the main one we like to talk about is taxation. So that's the one I'm going to go through, I think. And then they do talk about regulation as well. Sorry, one sec. I'll just carry on this video in a minute. Right. sorry about that. Just needed to check a few things before I carried on. So I'm going to get a different pen so you can kind of see. So that's the basic of our diagram we've got there. So the first thing you need to do, if it asks you anything to do with negative externalities, so it could be resolving it with taxation or regulation, you always draw this diagram without anything on it and explain it. So sorry, just missed out. A is a socially optimum equilibrium. I just put socially opt, and that means Q1 is a socially optimum output level. So, how can we explain this diagram? Well, I'm going to put like a little side thing here. which I'm going to know about, so you're going to need to keep up with this. So, you see that alright, yeah? Hopefully you can. So, how can we explain this diagram? Well, first thing you need to do, in the first two paragraphs, it doesn't matter which way around you put it, but you need to say where the socially optimum output level is. No. Say, I like to go with the private, or the free market. Yeah, free market equilibrium. You need to talk about that. The free market equilibrium, for that paragraph, you say where's private marginal cost curve intersects a private marginal benefit curve, it occurs at point C, it corresponds to the price level P and a quantity demanded Q. So that's the basic for that paragraph. And then you talk about the social optimum. We say where this occurs, where the social marginal cost curve intersects social marginal benefit curve, and that corresponds to the price P and quantity by Q1, which is social optimum output level. And then you'd say, well, you've talked about the two equilibriums now. So what you do then is you say, well, if it's a negative externalities diagram, which is what we're doing now, you talk about, well, yeah, but it doesn't actually happen in social optimum. What happens is the decision maker doesn't. Oh yeah, so you talk about the decision maker is sorry. Which way around is it? Sorry, just making sure I've got the right way around on the diagram. Just have to give me a minute, folks. Right. Yeah, so this paragraph is all about what the decision maker actually considers. So, the decision maker only takes into account the private costs and the private benefits of production. So therefore, you can say they're unaware of the external costs of production, which is represented on the diagram by the line BC. That's your third paragraph. So you talk about what does the decision maker consider. I'll go through all this in a minute. And then your fourth paragraph is basically explaining the above, so explaining the effect of this. So you're explaining the effect of, so if the decision maker doesn't consider these, what happens? You say subsequently, the decision maker prices too low at P. This results in too high a level of demand at Q. And yeah. So there is, yeah. So you said there's too high level demand at Q. Therefore, there is excess demand equal to Q minus Q1. So that means the economy is allocatively inefficient, and the economy will fail, or the market will fail. Sorry. That's your basic for that one. And then the fifth one is how could this be resolved? So, so you could, for this one, you say if the decision maker realised the true costs, social costs of his actions, and in brackets you put private plus external, then he would have priced a high level of P1, and this would have meant there would have been. Is this the right way around doing it? Yeah. So this would have meant that because he's charging a higher price P1, there's a contraction in demand equal to Q minus Q1. Oh, I mean, just that bit there. This means the economy is being allocatively efficient, and the market will be allocatively efficient, and it will no longer fail. So that's to explain in the diagram bit. So I'm going to go through that again. So your first paragraph is talking about the free market equilibrium, where it intersects, at what point it is, what curves intersect, at the price level, the quantity demanded. Ouch, scratch myself. Right. So, and then your next paragraph is the social optimum equilibrium, where it occurs, what point, what curves intersect, price level, quantity demanded. And then your third paragraph, what does the decision maker consider? So he or she only considers the private costs and the private benefits of the decision. So they ignore or are unaware of the external benefits which impact on the third party. And this is shown on the diagram by line BC, which you could probably, if you can see it behind me. And then your fourth paragraph, sorry, is that the fourth one? Yeah, it's the fourth one next. You say what happens as a result. So as a result, I forgot the name of it. Decision maker charges a price which is too low, which is where P0 equals the free market equilibrium. This corresponds with a lower price level of P0. I think it is. Yeah. It should be P0. Not very good at this, am I? Never mind. So the price too low at P0. This results in a too high level demand. Q0. That means there is excess demand equal to Q0 minus Q1. This means the economy is allocatively inefficient and therefore will fail. Yeah, and then your next paragraph is how this can be resolved. So if the decision maker had taken into the full social costs of their actions, they would have charged a higher price level equal to Q1, P1 even. When you talk about why they're charging that, you talk about private, external, etc. And this would result in a contraction in demand equal to Q0 minus Q1, as the allocatively efficient has been restored and the market will no longer fail. So that's your basic explanation for that diagram there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly rub this off, and then we're going to go on to how do I explain it. So, for example, the addition of a tax. So, just another thing before I go on. You need to know that a demerit good is exactly the same as a negative externality, because we are unaware of how bad the good actually is. But just in that third paragraph where you say it's because they don't realise the external, in the third paragraph, instead of saying they don't realise the external cost, it's because they are unaware. Just put they are unaware because of information failure. That's the only. And when you talk about demerit goods, that's the only thing you need to change. About changing, they are the external cost. They are unaware of the external cost because of information failure, not because of what we talked about in that explanation there. Okay, so if we're talking about a tax, we need to add something on. I'm going to do tax first, and then I'm going to do regulation next. So, a tax. So, just put tax. Just add a few things on. Right. So what we've added, you can see I've drawn this in black, so you can see what we've added on. So we've added on circled A, so our new equilibrium. We've added the tax, and we've added the PMC1 equals PMC plus tax. So, as you can see, the aim of PMC, the tax, is to increase the private marginal cost curve to equal social marginal cost curve. So, how can we explain this diagram? Well, obviously you're going to need to stay the same as before, but I'll go through all of that in a minute. So, the first paragraph you need to talk about is how the governments can solve. Governments intervening. Now, I'll explain this, instead of writing it down, I'll just explain it. Governments intervene. So, how do the governments intervene? Well, what you need to start off by saying is the governments can intervene to solve the problem of overproduction. That's the problem that causes, because we don't realise how bad it is. We overconsume. So the governments can intervene to solve the problem of overproduction caused by negative externalities by the introduction of a tax. And you need to say what that tax is. God, this pen doesn't like it. And you say this is a green. So if you talk about pollution, it's a green or environmental tax, which is green or environmental tax, which are indirect taxes on expenditure. So an indirect tax could be VAT. Yeah, is it? It's such an indirect tax. You see, don't need to worry about what taxes. I probably got it wrong there. I'll put a thing on if I have. So the government, so they can intervene with the tax, which is and the purpose of this tax is to make the polluter pay for their harmful actions, and this is done by internalising the externality. That is your first paragraph, so just go over that again in case you didn't get it. The governments can intervene to solve the problem of negative externalities, of overproduction caused by negative externalities with a tax. Taxes are a charge or a duty on pollution. The type of taxes used are green or environmental taxes. These are indirect taxes on expenditure. The purpose of these taxes is to make the polluter pay for their harmful actions. This is done by internalising the negative externality. Sorry, let me just put my camcorder in charge. Sorry. So just need to put my camcorder in charge. So our next. So we've talked about the government's intervening. So what's our next paragraph? Well, our next paragraph is the result on the diagram. So what does this PMC curve shift to? Well, the PMC, private marginal cost, because we're increasing them with a tax, it increases the private marginal cost curve for firms. So the tax, so you start off by saying the private marginal cost curve shifts leftwards by the amount of the tax to PMC1. PMC1 is equal to the private marginal cost curve plus the tax. That's so shift of PMC. Now the third one is about the new equilibrium. That's why I really can't spell. So they say the new equilibrium occurs at point A, and this corresponds with the price level P1 and a quantity demanded Q1. This is where the private marginal cost curve 1 intersects the private marginal benefit curve, this original one. So hopefully, I mean that's just a basic explanation of the point of where they intersect and what price and quantity demanded that it corresponds with. Your final, not your final one, your fourth paragraph, because that door's annoying me. That's what happens when people leave the door open. Sorry about that. Right. So your fourth paragraph is you're passing on the costs to the consumer. Now, as we know, firms are profit maximisers. So if they increase their private marginal, if they increase their costs, they're going to want to pass it on to the consumer in the form of a higher price. So how can we put this into an explanation? Well, I'll just put the paragraph 4 as passing on the costs. So, so we start off our paragraph by saying the consumer passes the higher cost onto the consumer in the form of a higher price, P1. This results in a reduction in quantity demanded from Q to Q1, because the law of demand states if you put the price of anything, the demand will fall by different amounts depends on what PED is, but we're going to that in a minute. So, and the reason the firms increase their prices is because they are profit maximisers and want to maintain their profit margin. So they increase the price and put it onto the consumers. And now it reduces to the socially optimum output level, assuming that the tax is equal to the value of the negative externality. That's your fourth paragraph done. I'm going to go through these in a minute, as I said. So, what's our fifth one? Well, our fifth one is summarising all of our points. So it's basically, a summary. So, in summary, because we've moved to the socially optimum output level, we can say overproduction has been corrected. It's no longer overproduction as we've arrived at the socially optimum output level. This means the economy is allocatively efficient and therefore the market will no longer fail. That's your basic last paragraph. That's the easier one to remember as long as you can remember to put it in. So, overall, what can we say? Well, if you get a question, sorry, it's my computer. So if you get a question that says, explain the effect of oh wait, actually you need to. So once you've done this, if it's asking, discuss the effect of, I don't know, smoking as a negative externality, as tax as a way of solving it. So you draw the diagram, you explain it, you explain the effect of an increase in tax if it asks you for that. You do the advantages and disadvantages, and then you compare it to another source. So what you do, so I'll go through it again. So you explain the diagram. So for the diagram, you say, so your first paragraph is where the free market equilibrium occurs, is at point C, where the private marginal cost curve intersects private marginal benefit curve, all the way around. This corresponds to the price level P and a quantity demanded Q. The social optimum equilibrium, because where the social marginal cost curve intersects social marginal benefit curve, this corresponds with the price level P1 and the quantity demanded Q1. So that's your start of your explanation of the diagram. And then you say what the decision maker considers. The decision maker takes into consideration only the private costs, or if you're talking about the context of the private costs. This is because they ignore or are unaware of the external costs which impact on the third party. This is represented on the diagram by the line BC. And then your fourth paragraph is what happens as a result. So subsequently, the decision maker price is too low. It corresponds with P, and this results in a too high level of demand at Q. So there's overproduction equal to Q0 or Q minus Q1, however you've labelled your diagram. And then your last one is how the decision maker could have resolved this. So if the decision maker had taken into the full account of full social costs of their actions, they would have taken into account the private and external costs. This means they would have charged a higher price P1, resulting in a contraction in demand from Q to Q1. So overproduction is corrected, etc., and the economy is allocatively efficient. So you don't really need to mention the overproduction when you just explain it, but it might seem a bit better if you do. So you're covering yourself there if you miss it out in this bit. So then you say how the government can intervene. So the government can intervene by introducing a tax. Taxes are you define what taxes, charge or a duty on pollution. The government uses green or environmental taxes. These are indirect taxes on expenditure. The purpose of these taxes is to make the polluter pay for their harmful actions. This is done by internalising the negative externality. Your next paragraph even is about the curve and which way it shifts. So the private marginal cost curve shifts to the left to PMC1 by the amount of the tax. Is there anything else I missed? I'm not sorry. Yeah, no, I'm not mistaken. And then your next paragraph is the new equilibrium where it occurs. So your new equilibrium occurs at point A on the diagram, if you can see it behind me. This is where the new private marginal cost curve, PMC1, intersects the original private marginal benefit curve, PMB. This corresponds to the price level P1 and a quantity banded Q1. Your next paragraph is about... Oh, what is it? Damn it, sorry. I could just look, but I'm trying to test myself here. Can't see no one. Mine's gone blank. Yeah, passing on the cost, Stephen. Mine went absolutely blank there. So, the firms pass on a higher cost of production onto the consumer in the form of a higher price, P1. This means a contraction in demand equal to Q minus Q1 because firms want to maintain their profit margins. So this is assuming the tax is equal to the value of the negative externality. And your final paragraph is summing it up, saying, in summary, the overproduction has been corrected for Q1 to Q0, etc. So this means there is no longer inefficiency even, and the market is no longer failing. That's your explanation of a tax. Now we need to consider the explanation of regulation. So what do we do? Well, we can't do this bit because that is to do with tax. You still explain the diagram in the same way. The first two paragraphs about the equilibriums. The third paragraph is about the decision maker, what they consider. The fourth paragraph is, as a result, they price too low, receive too high level of demand, allocative efficiency, inefficiency, etc. Oh yeah, so diverting too many of our scarce resources. You need to add that onto the paragraph about the decision maker pricing too low. Sorry, I missed that bit out. I knew there was something before. Yeah, and then your fifth paragraph is if they consider the true social costs, etc. So that you still explain the diagram in the same ways that you did for that. Except when you're talking about this bit, obviously you don't talk about tax. I mean, if you're talking about regulation, what an idiot! Why would you go into the exam and do that? So what you do instead is you say how regulation works. So you say regulation is a legal restriction. No, yeah, you can't use regulation. You need to find regulation. Yeah, forces the decision maker to apply with regulations. It's a legal requirement. This means government can control the spillover effects. The spillover effects is basically an externality. By enforcing, companies stick to the regulations, so the government can send out economic agents, obviously, which is a disadvantage because they're expensive. To make sure the regulations are complied with, regulations could be written warning. Yeah, so types of regulations that you can send out. You could be written warnings, which could affect publicity, sales. A company wouldn't want that. You could shut them down altogether, or fines. There's just a few of them. And then, so that's basically, when you're talking about that, you explain regulation, you're basically doing this bit. Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah, instead of putting tax, when you talk about regulation, just put regulation there. But you don't put all this crap, rubbish. So, and then you talk about benefits, no disadvantages of using regulation. A benefit is that it forces the consumers a no option other than to comply with this law. And yeah. So they're more likely to follow it, and also it's more easily, say for example, a regulation of 70 miles an hour on the motorway. We all know we should be driving at 70, but the vast majority of us don't. So we're more likely to comply with it. It's a poor example actually, but more likely to comply with it if we know what it is. So you're not going to be, oh, I didn't know that, officer, sorry, I didn't know it was 70 down the motorway, I thought it was 150. Obviously the drawbacks, I've said one of them, about it being quite costly, send out economic agents. The other thing is, It's a similar disadvantage to one about taxes, which I'll mention in a minute. A disadvantage, it's hard to set. You don't know what you're trying to correct, and the negative externality, it could be different to different people because of the value of judgment. It's like a polar bear losing at home could mean a different thing to me than someone who's like mad about the environment, for example. Generally, I didn't really care, but that's just my view. It's really good if I'm an economist. Anyway, so the disadvantages and advantages to tax. Now, an advantage of using taxation is that it raises revenue for the government, whereas regulation doesn't. So you could compare that and say, well, we could use a bit of both. As regulation gets people to understand it, and taxation actually raises revenue, whereas regulation doesn't. You could use that as a disadvantage for regulation. However, it takes time to see if I've missed anything else. Taxation, sorry. Yeah, reduces the consumption to the external cost, raises revenue, and then we're going to talk about price elasticity of demand. So if it's price inelastic, it's not going to affect it because the demand will fall by a small percentage. So it'll still fall. Don't get me wrong. It won't fall enough to the socially optimum equilibrium. So that's a disadvantage of tax, or an advantage if it was the other way around. If it's price elastic, then that we could use that as an argument as well. Yeah, so you could say it actually increases price, so inflationary pressure. Hopefully that's all of negative externalities done, and we'll see you in the next video if you survived.